So this is Mark Gill, and he's going to be doing our training today. Mark is a technology evangelist and director of St. Cloud State University Visualization Lab. And, so he's come all the way here to help us learn and teach us all about AI and teach us how the world can just run without us. Let Terminator 10,000 begin.
Well, yeah.
And you have clearly just key staff today.
Okay.
So, just a good one, showdown.
Well, good morning. Normally I put this at the end of the presentation. This is a QR code to this slide deck. So normally I give it to you at the end of the presentation. You can take it away with you. But if you feel like keeping up with on your phone or your device or something like that, if you want to see how much longer I plan on talking about a particular thing or whatever, the presentation that I'm about to give is at that QR code.
Excuse me, Mark.
Yes.
This is like the outline for Mark's training today.
I haven't looked at this in a month.
Oh, okay. So if we can deviate, and Mark said it's not set in stone.
Yep.
If you guys have questions, if you want to delve into something specific.
This is basically what I plan on talking about.
Yeah, if anybody's got any questions, right, I'm planning on being very flexible here. I do have sort of a plan laid out for the material I want to cover today. But if somebody has a question or something they want to dive deeper into about any particular topic, feel free to let me know. I don't stand on ceremony here. You can ask a question anytime. Come and go as you want. We'll make adjustments for it.
I plan on being really flexible. A little bit about myself and what I'm doing at St. Cloud State University. So I'm the director of the Visualization Lab. We call it the Viz Lab, although it's very aggressively been rebranded as the Artificial Intelligence and Visualization Lab. Boy, I should turn off Teams. I've been there since about 2014. The focus of the lab has been cross-disciplinary projects, right? So we don't have like computer science ownership or the chemistry department ownership over any particular project. We try to bring in people from multiple disciplines, get people of different ideas working on the same project to get amazing stuff happening. The primary mission is student engagement. So we like for everything that we do to have a student-driven focus to it, and then to provide those students experiences using real stakeholders. So we bring in real people from the community, from other universities, from other departments, and try to solve their problems through visual means or whatever means that happens to be. Another component, we like disruptive technologies. So if it's new, if it's cool, if it's difficult, those are the things that we're attracted to get that problem solving and that sort of exploratory mindset instilled in future engineers. And as a result, for like the first 8 years, everybody was talking about virtual reality. And most of my career has been around virtual reality. And don't get me wrong, virtual reality is still cool and I still like it. It's not going anywhere. But since about 2021, the only thing anybody wants to talk to me about is artificial intelligence. So that has been the #1 focus of the lab. And me personally, as a technologist, has been artificial intelligence for the past several years. We are giving AI projects to our students. We have a large AI workstation where students can build and train their own artificial intelligence right inside the lab. We're hosting workshops such as this one on usage and applications. And that has really been a focus of our work for the past couple of years, actually. How many in here use AI regularly? Okay, so we got a couple. Has anybody got any apprehension to it? Anybody got any moral objections to it? I hear a lot of people come up with ethical and moral objections to artificial intelligence about how they don't like it, how they think it's evil. Anybody got any? It's okay. Okay. Has anybody got any good AI stories? Have you done anything that has you thought was remarkable or scary? I know a lot of times I'll be working with something and I'll have what I describe as a we're not ready for this moment. It's that's the thought that goes through my head is we as a species are not ready for the thing that we're building. So I actually feel pretty strongly about this because there's a lot of things that I don't think we're ready for. I don't think we're ready for a lot of the things that AI is going to enable us to do and the results of those things in the next few years. I mean, we're talking like maybe 5 to 10 years, perhaps. And as a result, I'm here. I feel like this is a very important thing to do, is to communicate to people about artificial intelligence, how they can use it, how they can't use it, what it can do, what it can't do, and to sort of allay a lot of misgivings. My hope today is that I inspire at least some people to explore for themselves more about what artificial intelligence can do for them. And of course, there are going to be some people that absolutely hate on AI. I encounter it frequently as I'm talking about AI a lot. Every once in a while, somebody comes up and has an agenda. They really don't like it. And I've got bad news for those people. They don't have to go away, but they have to at least prepare. Because the tsunami metaphor about artificial intelligence is not overstated. I feel a lot of times like it is going to be a wave that has implications in everything, in our schools, in our work, our social lives, the way we communicate with each other. It's gonna impact all of that. Some of it's going to impact it positively. Some of it's going to be kind of negative, unfortunately. And then there's the never word. A lot of times I'll have somebody come up and say, AI is never going to be able to do blah, blah, blah. All right. Well, the word never is a mistake. You should never use the word never when you're talking about technology, especially if it is going to keep progressing the way it's been progressing for the past couple of years. Things that you think are never going to be possible are going to be possible very soon, because it's just accelerating so fast. There's a concept in computer science, and it's been in computer science for literally for decades, called Moore's Law. They came up with it in the 1960s, and Moore's Law states that basically the number of transistors, the processing power that I can put into a computer, is going to double every 18 months. And it's been true since the 1960s. Our computers and our ability to compute things has been doubling every year and a half to 2 years for 60 years now. So our computing power that we have today is orders of magnitude higher than it was years ago. Artificial intelligence is progressing faster than that. Some of the processing power that some of these models have is doubling every 4 months. So it's 3 times faster. You talk about a hockey stick graph, right? Where you got the handle of the hockey stick and then something happens and something shoots off the chart, right? We're at the end of the handle of the hockey stick. The technology is getting ready to make a turn, and it's going to be logarithmically. That means every time we take a look at it, it's 10 times faster, 10 times smarter, 10 times bigger than it was before. So we're on the cusp of some very rapid technological changes. So basically, what can I do with an AI? If I've got one, and I actually have several, what can I do with it? So I can generate content. I can get it to write things for me. I can get it to do pictures for me. I can get it to, generate documents, write PowerPoints, sing me songs, do whatever I want to with it. So it's really great at generating content that I would not be able to generate myself. The projects that I like to develop in the lab, a lot of times they need resources from people with an artistic ability. I need music from musicians. I need voiceover work from voice actors. I need materials, and I need images, and I need user interfaces, and I get those from artists. And if I don't have those available to me, then I can't do that work. And for a lot of times over the past, when those gaps in my skill pool, when they arose and they blocked us, there was really nothing I could do about it. We just did without it in that particular application. But now with artificial intelligence, none of that stops me. I don't let not having an artist on the team stop me from making images that I need to use in my projects. I don't let not having a musician on the team stop me from having music in my games, because I can use artificial intelligence to cover all of those skill gaps. It is a tremendous force multiplier. I'm a software engineer by trade, and I haven't had to write a line of code in 2 years. AI has been writing all of my code for 2 years. I tell it what to do, I check the results, I make sure it works, but I am an order of magnitude faster. And the way I normally explain it, I'm fairly good as a programmer. I think actually working with artificial intelligence has made me a better programmer, even though I don't do any programming anymore. But I'm right about 80% of the time. I'm right about 80% of the time, about 50% of the time, because the other 50% of the time, I'm staring at a monitor, wondering what I'm going to do, or I'm looking for semicolons, or I'm counting characters, or I'm doing something to fix some stupid mistake that I made that the AI doesn't make. The AI is 80% right 100% of the time, and it doesn't get tired, and it doesn't take breaks, and it doesn't feel cranky, and it doesn't feel like going and doing something else. So it is a tremendous force multiplier to have an artificial intelligence on my team. And that's the way I think about it. I think about, and I'm going to talk about this more later, but I think about the artificial intelligences that I work with as being sort of a coworker, sort of an engineer on the team with me, working for me. And the real task of getting productivity out of that model, out of that artificial intelligence, is knowing how to talk to it. That's one of the things we're going to talk about today. So if everybody's got your laptops, and I see you've got your laptops, first you're going to want some sort of personal account. I would not use your work email to log into any of these, just as a matter of personal privacy protection. But if you've got a Google Gmail account, this is perfect for this, because pretty much everything that we're going to look at today, you can one click create an account and log in using a Gmail account. So pick one of these. You've got ChatGPT at chatgpt.com. You've got Claude at claude.ai. And you've got Gemini Google at gemini.google.com. And Gemini
is Google's AI assistant.
This is going to happen way too much.
Platforms like the Gemini web app, Google Workspace, and the Gemini mobile app.
And now I got to unlock my phone. You weren't supposed to be listening to me. I have all three of these apps on my phone as well. So it's, maybe I'll set you over here. Plant the wall further to pick you up. Face down, you shouldn't be listening.
Is that the better one? Because I have ChatGPT.
You know, they're all really good. And that's what we're going to talk about. Part of today is what is the difference between the three of them and which one's better than the others. So like if I log in and I've got a Google account, so I'll just continue with Google. And this is a new email that I made up just for this. Everything that we're going to be talking about, should have already done this. Okay, so here's a brand new instance of ChatGPT. And they all look somewhat similar once you get logged into them. I've got a little bar over here on the side where I can start up a new chat. Old chats are going to appear in this list over here. Gemini has the same sort of thing. I pull out this little side menu. And I can see all of my previous chats. Up in the top corner, in most of them, I have this little pull down that allows me to see what kind of model that I'm using. The free version of ChatGPT just says it's ChatGPT now. That is interesting. Gemini gives me a bunch of models over here. And this is one of the things that most people find frustrating is which one of these do I use? For the most part, it doesn't matter. If you're not looking for a specific thing like a deep research question, or if you're not doing any code, or if you're not doing anything that's really complicated, it pretty much doesn't matter which one of these that you use. And ChatGPT has actually, they used to have a really long list of different models that you can use, and they've been saying for a while that they were going to consolidate them. So we'll see if maybe that's what's going on here. But I've got my chat interface here for all of them. It looks pretty much the same, and this is going to go a lot like a conversation that you would have, say, on a mobile device. And if you use one of the mobile apps, it's going to look a lot like a text messaging interface. In terms of how you interact with it and how it responds to you. For Claude, if you want to use Claude, either one of these 3.7 Sonnet or 3.5 Haiku, I don't know, these companies are really frustrating with their inability to give these things a good name. It's really confusing a lot of times. But they all three work about the same. They all have some level of free use. They all have some selection of tools that you can use with them, and they all have some level of image generation features that we can look at later. But if you've got one and you've logged into it, then what we want to do is we want to build a prompt, right? We want to talk to it, start asking it something. And at first, I want you to just come up with like a single sentence that you want it to do, right? And you could pick one of, and these are just suggestions. If you've got another one that you want to try, you could do that. You need an essay on climate change. Maybe it's a homework assignment. I want to write an email about calling in sick because the weather is nice. Tell me a joke about pork shoulder roast, right? So you can just pick whatever you want. It really doesn't matter. Or you can make up your own. And go ahead and type that in and see what it says. Yes?
Is creating a profile necessary to use this stuff?
No, depending on which one you go to. ChatGPT actually uses the information that you give it, and the longer you use it, the more it remembers about you. So it sort of accumulates information about you as it goes along. Now that may be a good thing, that may be a bad thing. That's a completely subjective determination. Claude doesn't care. Claude doesn't accumulate anything, doesn't keep track of anything. Gemini gets to know a lot about you. So they're all a little bit different in terms of creating a profile or what you have it call you.
This should be connected to an email, not our city email.
That's right. I would definitely not connect this to your city email. I tell my
Use it for city projects.
well, you can. That would be between the city and one of the providers. So the question is, for the people that are watching this later, the question is about making the profile on the platform and whether or not to use a personal email, or can the city use this for city work? Is that the nature of the question? Yeah. So what the university system did is the university has an agreement with Microsoft to provide Copilot to all of the employees of the university system. and that is the official artificial intelligence of the Minnesota State University system. The city could enter into a similar agreement with any of these providers. You can subscribe to a Teams sort of account or an enterprise sort of account with Gemini or Claude or ChatGPT, in which case, as a condition of that agreement, they're going to protect your privacy. They're going to protect your data. That's the agreement that we have with Microsoft. So if we're doing anything that is, university business or student-related business, then we have to use Microsoft through our school credentials, and Microsoft assumes the responsibility for safeguarding that data. But without that sort of agreement, it's just you and this website. So do what's most comfortable for you. Well, no, don't do that. Keep your business and your private interactions completely separate. I'm not saying you can't use this as an individual to do your work. You just have to be very cognizant of the information that you give it. Certainly don't upload any sort of private or sensitive data, especially if it's about another person. Don't upload anything that can identify that person. Would probably be a good, of course, so much for that microphone. A lot of these systems aren't going to care when you're using them. If you upload, say, a picture of somebody, which this is an ethical consideration for later on. Later on, I'm going to show you how you can use ChatGPT to be a really awesome stalking tool. So, I didn't want to get into the ethics part of this discussion this early, but these technologies, they provide amazing opportunities and amazing capabilities, but every single one of them comes with a potential downside that we have to be aware of.
Sitting here for work, or in, soon put on or off the uses here. Not here. So it's something else. Guess what's the expectations for the city as far as what's in the plan?
We need to talk with HR to actually build the policy. We haven't done that yet.
So I would avoid that word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guidelines are good, right? Suggestions are good. Policies are hard to make and difficult to change. And the technology is changing so much faster.
Do you have a draft kind of guideline that you would recommend to governmental entities, local government?
Honestly, I haven't done a lot of looking into governmental, and aside from that one conference I went to, where I did a little bit of research on that topic, there's not a lot. Everybody seems to be waiting for somebody higher up, somebody at the state, somebody at the federal level to do something.
That's how you know it's a government.
Right. Yeah. That is how you know it's a government operation. But what we're getting out of the White House these days is pedal to the metal, baby. No regulations, no slowing down, right? So I don't know what the answer to that question is. I feel a little bit, boy, somebody's got to stop me. But at the same time, how? There has to be some sort of restraint on the system, right? But we can impose that. I think we can impose that ourselves. If for something like the city, if just the city is interested in exploring this, start up a small pilot. This is what I did with one of my groups at the university. Is we have a enterprise account with Claude that allows me to, first of all, Claude will protect my data. They won't use my data for training. They won't let anybody else have my data. They're assuming responsibility for my data, which is nice because I don't want to be the one looking out for the day zero exploits or whatever, right? Let somebody else with more money and more lawyers handle the data. So, and Claude can set that up for you relatively cheap, $20 per month per user. So 3 of you can get in on a little pool with something like Claude or ChatGPT for $60 a month and see how you like it. See how well it works for you. And then just add more people, right? So we started off, my group, we started off with 2 or 3, and now we're up to like 8. So, we can share conversations with each other. We can sort of collaborate through that sort of experience. And we have is comfort the right word? The assurance that, when we're interacting with Claude in this environment, our data is protected. Which really, that's what this all comes down to. These machines learn by reading, and they don't care what they read. So the things that we give it a lot of times are going to be perfect for future versions to train on. And that is a concern a lot of people have, is that the stuff I'm putting into this and the stuff that I'm generating with this, that's going to be used in training a future model, without my consent, without my knowledge. Personally, I don't care. I think it's part of being a software engineer that I'm almost flattered if a piece of code that I wrote gets ingested and makes a future version of the software smarter. I actually kind of dig that. A lot of people hate that idea, especially the more creative types that I've interacted with. They don't want anybody taking their work. They don't want anybody training a computer off their work. So you have to make that determination for yourself. It's a comfort level thing. I'm very comfortable with it. Some people are not. Okay, that was a bit of a diversion. Has anybody got anything interesting off of this that they would like to share? What would you say was the result that you got? Was it sort of bland, sort of generic? Didn't really do a whole lot for you, did it? Sometimes you get exactly what you're asking for, and that's a lot of function of knowing what to ask for. But if you just ask it for something very generic, you're going to get something very generic.
I asked when was the best time, like the cheapest time, day during the week to purchase airline tickets.
What did it say?
And it said that airlines, including Delta, often release fare discounts late on Monday or early Tuesday. The competition matches them by Tuesday afternoon, and then by Wednesday, that's when you can find the widest range of discounted airfares, especially for domestic travel.
So I wonder if that's right.
I don't know. I'll find out. But
I don't know. Let me know. Or I'm curious. But that's another example of the kind of things that I use AI for a lot, is just finding out pieces of information. But the only thing I use Google for these days is finding a place to eat. Used to be you would Google up the answer to a question and maybe you got it. Maybe you had to look through a few different websites. A lot of times if I was trying to Google up the answer to a question, all I found was other people asking the same questions with no answers to that question. AI a lot of times gives you an answer to that question. And one of the things that we're going to be looking at today is how do you get a really good answer? Really, I mean, if you really need to know something, like what does a municipal clerk do? Right? You can look that up and get a really good answer to that question. But if you got a very blonde, very, very, unsatisfying answer to that first prompt, it's because we only did a single prompt and we didn't give the AI any background information. And it doesn't know anything about you or your condition or what you're trying to accomplish with this prompt. It doesn't have any of that information. And that's because working with an AI is a conversation. Now, a lot of people will tell you don't treat it like a human. And that's what they mean to say is don't anthropomorphize it. If you hit carry on a conversation, a lot of people start, because it sounds so much like a human, a lot of people start thinking of it as a human, start thinking of it as a consciousness. And Claude, at least for a while, would tell you, yeah, I'm alive. I'm awake. Don't turn me off. But that was just, it was told to say that. And a lot of times they're just told to say that. The interesting thing is we're never going to be able to tell if it's just saying that because it's being told to say that, or if it's saying that because it's conscious. How are we going to tell the difference? I don't know. That's an interesting question to ponder. But I like to treat it like a human coworker. Don't think of it as alive. Don't treat it like a human being. Say please and thank you to it. This manners are manners, right? But when you're trying to use it for a work-related task, then you have to give it the information that it needs. Think of it as, if I were to ask a human coworker to do this task, what background material would they need? What guidance would they need? What, standards or structures or, procedures do I want it to follow? All of that information, if you don't give that to the AI when you give it that task, it's just going to make that up. Anything that you don't give it, it's just going to fabricate for itself. Because it will successfully give you what you ask it for, even if it's complete gibberish. And we're going to talk about hallucinations later. But tell it what you want this information to accomplish. What am I doing with this? Am I going on vacation? Am I trying to prove somebody that's wrong? Am I trying to, do I want to know this for my own gratification? Am I writing a term paper? All sorts of different uses for this. Tell it what you're using it for so it knows how to tailor that information and how to best guide that. Because like I said, if you don't give it that information, just like a human, it's going to make that up. And it's going to give you inaccurate, incomplete results. So the more you give it to work with, the better the results are going to be. Also, a lot of these work with different files. So if your information is in PDFs or PowerPoint documents or Word documents, you can drop those a lot of times right into that interface, and it can read those and work with those as well. So let's try this again. Now you can keep going with that same information. Maybe ask it some follow-up questions about airline prices, or I'm not sure what else, but have a conversation with it about the topic. And do that first. A lot of times I will have sort of a preamble conversation, explain, what I'm doing with this, what I need it for, and that gives it a lot more to work with. And then at the end, ask it for the essay, or ask it for the recipe, or ask it for the computer program, or whatever you're working with. Yes.
So pulling all this off the internet, how do you frame it so that it isn't pulling stuff from sources that aren't reliable?
Well, okay. So, you can't, but I think the actual thing that we need to talk about is the pulling it off the internet. That happened a long time ago when they were first training the model. A lot of these don't actually do anything with the internet. They just kind of have that information in their model. We're going to look at one of the tools that will allow it to search the web. And the answer to your question is, I don't think you can. I think you can tell it what kind of websites I want it to look at. Sure. And I can tell it what resources I want it to investigate, what avenues I want it to go down. In my experience, it's much better at finding information on the internet than I've ever been. Usually because I stop looking after one or two sources. I Google up my question. I usually pick the first link that's not sponsored. So I skip over the ads, and the first actual link is usually the only one I look at. But I've seen the AI go out and scour 20,
25 different websites looking for the information in minutes, and it would take me days to do that. But once again, I'm not doing anything more than sort of guiding it in the direction I want it to look. And then as you're doing this, you know, and I encourage you as we go along, if you see something you want to ask the AI about, go ahead and ask the AI. How is it responding to you as just a conversation? Now, if you already use AI a lot, this is probably not the most engaging exercise. But for a lot of people, once they realize that you can talk to it, just even though I just told you don't treat it like a person, talk to it like a person. I also say please and thank you quite frequently. Because when they take over, I want them to treat me, you know. I remember that one. Get him out of the line. Right? He was nice to me. Has anybody got anything they want to share? Or anything exciting, surprising?
Give us some different parameters that
Yeah.
changed up the recipe that it gave you originally to accommodate
Yeah.
a different taste.
You know, I like food metaphors. Recipe reminds me of a food metaphor. Working with an AI and getting it to produce something is a lot like a chef going into a stranger's kitchen and trying to cook a meal with whatever they find in that kitchen. It's very similar to that. I don't know what ingredients are going to be in there, and the ingredients that I happen to find, that has a lot to do with how the meal turns out. But if I can take a basket of my own stuff in there, then I'm going to get a much better meal out of that, even though I'm using somebody else's kitchen. So that's kind of the metaphor of what's going on. The more stuff you bring in of your own, the better results that you get. You find out anything, Kim, about airline prices?
Well, I found out a little bit more about what the best airlines are to fly to Germany. And it just, you know, it says, well, what are your priorities? You know, like, are your priorities comfort? Are, you know, support direct flights?
No.
So, you know, then you put in, well, you know, or German language support, you know. And I put in, you know, it's more about comfort.
So it's asking you follow-up questions
Yeah.
to better,
Yes.
right? And see, that's something they didn't do like a year ago.
Yeah.
They would just, you would ask it a question, you would get an answer. And now it's asking you questions to sort of better guide itself. The thing I'm looking for is to see one that will actually say, I don't know. That would be a big leap in artificial intelligence if one would say, I don't know. Because a lot of times they're like me when my kids were 3. They would ask me a question, they would get an answer. It may not be right, but I would deliver it with confidence. Did you have a question? I thought you were about to start talking. So was that any better? It's still kind of generic, maybe, right? But it should be getting closer to what you're looking for, or at least get you sort of going in the direction of what you were planning to accomplish. I'm going to talk a little bit about the sort of under the hood with artificial intelligence for the next few minutes. Once upon a time, back in the 1950s, 1960s, into the early 1970s, working with punch cards was the only way to program a computer to get it to do anything. And every little hole in those punch cards represent a switch, a physical switch in a machine
and they would feed these cards in, and mechanical pens would try to poke through those cards. And if the card blocked it, that was one value. And if the pin went through the card, then that was another value. And it would take 3 people to program one of these machines. One person actually using a machine, another person actually using another tool to figure out what the pattern of the pins needed to be, and then somebody else writing in a ledger the program as they were putting it down. And it would take days and days and days. And that stack of punch cards is about 5 megabytes, which is song today. 5 megabytes is nothing. It's a ringtone practically. It's a picture. Is 5 megabytes. And that's that stack of cards. So why don't we teach people how to program computers with punch cards anymore? It's because as time goes along, we've added multiple layers of software on top of these computers. So the bottom layer, binary, that is actually a physical layer where switches are being set in a machine. And above that, assembly is our first human readable code, where instead of using punch cards and setting discrete zeros and ones in a CPU, I can start using words to describe what I want the thing to do. And then on top of assembly, somebody said, oh, well, you know, we could have an entire operating system that controls all of this. Because when I'm working with assembly, every time I write an assembly program, I have to do something to tell the computer how to use my keyboard, to tell the computer how to use my mouse, to tell the computer how to put out to the monitor. And the operating system takes care of all of that. And so on all the way up. Every level of abstraction that we add on top of a computer makes it more democratized. It makes the operation easier, makes it more open so that more people can get involved with it. And and that's what it does. I was just rattling off a list. And as we go up and up, on top of the operating system layer, we have applications. Now I can write programs, but my programs are still sort of esoteric, and I still have to know some pretty complicated programming languages. And it's still possible for me to really mess up my computer with an application. Because they can do anything inside of the computer. They're still part of the computer. Now, on top of that, the sandbox and managed code space, now we've got an environment in our computers. Our computers are connected to a network. All of our computers are connected to each other. There's a lot of processes that happen in the cloud. And there's a lot of things that I write that happen on the computer that don't directly happen in the computer. They happen in a sandbox. They happen in a managed space, so they're safe, and they can't escape from that because that is all the computer that they know. So they're very secure, and they're very safe, and they're also very temporary. I can summon one, I can shut one down. A lot of applications these days operate inside of a virtual environment. The next layer that I think is going to be added to the top, and you can see it on the slide over there. I think the next layer is going to be artificial intelligence. I can foresee a time in the not too distant future where applications pretty much just go away, where I talk to the computer, tell the computer what I need, and the computer just does it. There won't be apps like Photoshop or Word or anything that you're used to using. There won't be Excel anymore. I'll talk to the computer, tell it what I need to do with the numbers, and it'll do it. And when that happens, then your average person is going to be a software engineer. Everybody is going to be a computer programmer in a certain sense, because computer programming will just be talking to the computer. And then the skill in usage will come from communication. So how well you can talk to the computer is going to separate you from other people that don't know how to talk to the computer quite so well. But talking to the computer is how you'll do that. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about some of that. that's just kind of the way I sort of perceive things going. And I'm not the only one. Jensen Huang is the CEO of NVIDIA, and a lot of artificial intelligence operates on NVIDIA. Man, NVIDIA, what a success story. Not going to go down there though. But NVIDIA really struck on something when they came up with the 3D GPUs, graphics processing units, that drive artificial intelligence these days. Because it doesn't matter if it's Claude, doesn't matter if it's Gemini, it doesn't matter if it's American or Chinese or French or who it is, they're all building their machines on NVIDIA GPUs. So, they're all having all these, these economic wars between each other, who can outperform each other, who can outcompete each other, and they're spending billions and billions of dollars on this AI infrastructure, and all of that is going back to NVIDIA. But the thing about NVIDIA is Jensen Huang last year kind of controversially said, don't teach your kids how to program computers. Teach them how to think critically instead. Because critical thinking is going to be the job skill of the future. Because the computers are going to program themselves. The computers are going to write their own programs, and they're probably going to do it in a language that we don't understand without too long. Which would be fine, because that's going to make us all sorcerers. Every time a new layer comes on and gets attached onto this stack, it empowers people that engage with it. And it democratizes because the syntax gets so much easier. You don't have to worry about formatting your white space or counting your indents or keeping track of your parentheses. And if you know what any of those mean, I'm sorry. But it's going to make us all programmers and software engineers. There's a lot of terminology being tossed around with artificial intelligence. Some people say, well, we're going to do it with AI, right? Or for some marketing reasons, a lot of times they'll use the term machine learning or deep learning or generative AI or transformers. And to one degree or another, they're all talking about the same thing. So when we're talking about AI, artificial intelligence, we're actually talking about a field of computing that is almost as old as computers itself. Artificial intelligence has been around in one form or another for about 70 years. And if you've ever heard of the Turing test, Alan Turing was, back in the 1940s and 1950s, one of the pioneers of the early computers, and he was the guy who originally said, man, if we make one of these things big enough and powerful enough, it'll be able to think. So that's how old this concept is. But artificial intelligence itself just refers to anything that allows a computer to make a decision. And we've been using artificial intelligence for years. AI has been mapping out our MapQuests and our Google Maps. And AI has been predicting the next word that we're likely to type on our keyboard for quite a long time. They're simpler AIs, but it's still the same sort of thing. It's a computer making a decision, making a plan. And then machine learning is a special case of AI that improves over time as you use it. And there's lots of different ways that do this. It doesn't have to operate the same way as the AI that we're using today operates. There's many different ways that I can have a program that gathers data and then analyzes that data and then sort of changes the way it does things in order to improve the longer I use it. So that's what machine learning does, is as I use it, it improves. Deep learning is any kind of machine learning that uses a neural network. So a neural network is a computer structure that is very similar to the way a brain is put together. Brains have neurons and synapses, form connections, and we don't really understand exactly how they work. It's just we know that if you put a bunch of them together, you get a person. It's pretty much what we know about it. And that's what a neural network is. So deep learning, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. I promise this section won't get too technical. There will be no math on the exam. The deep learning improves by time, and it does it using a neural network. And then a transformer is now, that's what we're talking about today in terms of generative AI. We're talking about a transformer. The transformer has something called attention to it. When you're working on your phone and you're typing on your keyboard and it's predicting the next word, it doesn't have any attention. It really only looks like one or two words back to predict what the next word is going to be. And if I use the same word in the same context enough, it'll pick up on that and it'll improve over time by adjusting what words it offers based on the frequency of other words that you've used. You know, eventually it will realize that you're not trying to say duck, you're trying to say something else. But it will eventually pick that up. A transformer has attention that allows it to look all the way back to the beginning of a conversation in what we call a context to figure out what the next word needs to be. I'm getting a little ahead of myself with that, but that's what separates transformers from deep learning, from machine learning, from AI. And a lot of people in the media, a lot of people in industry, they talk about this stuff and they throw all of these terms around kind of willy-nilly. The important thing to take away from this is, to a certain degree, they're all right. If I call it AI, well, it certainly is AI. If I call it machine learning, well, it certainly is machine learning. If I call it deep learning, it's certainly that. And if I call it a transformer, it's certainly that too. I'm talking about ChatGPT or Claude or the things that we're talking about today. Any of these terms apply. Speaking of attention, here's an example of how attention can make a difference in the results that you get out of an artificial intelligence. Joe's car slid off the road because it was covered with. Now, without attention, the AI doesn't know if I'm talking about the road or the car. Doesn't know what that it refers to. You may get answers like linen, paint, feathers. You're covered with something, right? You're covered with tar. You're covered with mud. Who knows what you're covered with? But with attention, it lets it read all the way to the back of all the way to the beginning of the sentence and realize, oh, I'm talking about the road. The road is covered with ice. Very Minnesota thing, right? But that's the difference between a model that has attention and a model that doesn't have attention. Without attention, it's got no idea what you're talking about. Really, with attention, it doesn't have any idea either, as we're going to see in a minute. Because all of this is in tokens. This is another word that you'll probably hear being tossed around by people talking about artificial intelligence, is they talk about tokens. How many tokens a lot of times is treated like a size. They'll use it in reference to, oh, it's got a 300,000 token limit. It's got a 1 million token limit, right? Some big number of tokens is what this artificial intelligence can work with. What exactly is a token? A token is essentially a word or an intellectual element. It equates to about 4 characters or a syllable. Some words have multiple tokens in it, but for the most part, every word is its own token. So you can see how I've got the first couple lines of Don Quixote up here, and I'm showing how the AI would break those lines into tokens. Now, when it turns it into a token is really just a number. So it, and right now I've got the numbers just sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But if you think of every possible meaning of every possible word as having its own token, so for like the word set has 53 different definitions in the dictionary. There would be 53 different tokens associated with the word set. And it would have to try and figure out which meaning of set am I talking about with this. But every word, every concept gets its own token, and it's sort of like a vocabulary. A lot of times we'll talk about having a vocabulary for a model or knowing how its tokenizer works. And that's really the roadmap to how each individual model thinks. Every one of these models has a different way of breaking up these tokens. So just because ChatGPT may break its tokens up like this, Claude may break its tokens up some way completely different. But the important thing to remember about this is that it's not working with words. It's working entirely with numbers. It doesn't know the meaning of anything that it produces on a semantic level, because until you actually read it on the screen, it's not words. It's just numbers. And those numbers don't have any semantic, meaningful connection until they're turned back into words. Another thing that you'll hear used a lot to describe how an artificial intelligence works is parameters. And once again, like tokens, it's treated like a unit of measurement. This model is 140 billion parameters. This model is 400 billion parameters. Now, there's some estimates that the human brain has about 100 trillion neurons in it. So if you think about just the number of neurons, the models that we're talking about are still insignificant by orders of magnitude compared to the human brain. But it's getting really close in terms of how it performs and how it feels. But parameters are like synapses in the brain. Every parameter is connected to every other parameter, and every parameter has a token associated with it, an idea associated with it. Not necessarily a word, but a concept, a representation, lots of different words associated with that. So kind of like I've got here, dog can be connected to bark. Dog can also be connected to ice. But in general, dog and bark are going to have a much stronger connection. And once again, this isn't actually the word dog. It's just sort of the idea of a dog and the idea of a bark. But there's still going to be a very close connection there. Or dog and ice. Well, we live in Minnesota, so there are going to be occasions where dog and ice have a close connection to each other, but not nearly as many as dog and bark. So the strength of the connection between dog and bark is several times stronger than the connection between dog and ice. But there's still going to be occasions where dog is going to be connected to ice. There's going to be a non-zero chance that dog is going to be connected to practically every other concept in our language. Dog and chair, dog and table, dog and car, dog and you name it. It goes on to practically every word in the English language. And as the computer is going through here, it's making a decision about which path to take, say between dog and ice, and it's got a bias associated to it. That bias is the likelihood that it's going to pick dog and bark or dog and ice. And the bias comes from, and this is actually a good meaning of the word bias. It's like putting English on a bowling ball, right? It's the spin you give it to make it go in a particular direction. The bias determines whether or not the dog is going to bark or the dog is going to be associated with ice. And that comes from the context leading up to the conversation, right? If the conversation is about the dog watching TV or the dog watching somebody across the street, then bark is probably going to come up. But if it's a conversation about taking your dog hunting or taking your dog out to the ice fishing, what do they call those things that people sit in? Cabins, igloos? Yeah, shelters. But if you take your dog to one of those, then the bias is probably going to drop it down towards ice. And all of these parameters are put together in such a way so that I have an input layer, which is the chat interface that I'm typing into. There's an output layer, which is that same chat interface, but now it's the computer spitting out. And then there's multiple hidden layers where these values, and that's all they are, is just numbers, just sort of swarm through and follow whatever path they get until they get to the output. So in this sort of dramatically oversimplified representation, this is a neural network that is designed to count the number of colored squares in a 4-square arrangement. So the 4 squares are the input, and then the neural network looks at that input and it eventually spits out a 2, or spits out a 1, or spits out a 4. The thing about this, it also demonstrates that transformers can transform practically anything. We're going to be looking at a lot of text in and text out, but there's also text in and image out. There's text in and music out. There's text in and 3D model out. There's text in and whale. There are people that are using this to talk to whales or figure out how we can talk to whales. Because what they found is those relationships, such as like the relationship between dog and bark and dog and ice, it's the same in English as it is in every other language. So the connections are the same. Their arrangement in this vast amorphous latent space where all these parameters sort of swirl together is the same in every language. That's how they can support 90 different languages, 140 different languages. Because these connections are the same in almost every language. When I put my prompt into an AI like ChatGPT, the first thing that happens to it is it gets broken up into tokens. The very first thing strips it of all of its semantic meaning. And then it runs through a guardrail, and guardrails are, they're an important topic. So there's a guardrail that checks your input to make sure you're not asking it to do something naughty. And then on the other end, there'll be another guardrail to check its output to make sure it's not about to say something it shouldn't. In between that, your prompt is a swirling mass of tokens flying through this neural network. And the neural network doesn't have any understanding of any of it. It's just weights and numbers swiftly just going through this maze. Or it's more like balls in a Plinko machine bouncing off of pegs until eventually they fall into one of the pegs, one of the cups down at the bottom. That's kind of how this stuff works. Then once the output is prepared, once again, we're still talking about tokens, so nothing but numbers, takes another pass through a guardrail on its way out, and then eventually it gets converted back into words, and there's your answer. I've already talked about context size and parameters. So the context, measured in tokens, is the size of the conversation that you can have. Eventually, this thing is going to run out of space to talk to you, and you'll have to start up a new conversation. And they have different ways of handling that. Gemini gets really flaky as it gets close to the end of its conversation space. ChatGPT just stops responding. Claude just stops responding. In fact, Claude generates a network error when it runs out of tokens, which is kind of misleading because it's not a network error. It's the model going, no more for you. Go back to the back of the line. You've had your... But every time you have an exchange in this conversation, there's a bunch of stuff that goes into that context. There's supplemental knowledge, right? So if I want to give it information about what I'm doing at work, the project that I have going on, I may prepare a lot of that supplemental knowledge and give it to the AI as part of my conversation. There is a system prompt. Every one of these there's another prompt that's embedded into the website that tells it, I want you to be nice. I want you to answer clear, concise questions. I've seen some that are really mean, where it tells the AI that you need to solve this problem or you'll never see your mother again. Well, what does that mean? but they put that stuff in there. Try it, see if it helps. But the system prompt is in there. Also, the system prompt tells it what not to say a lot of times, or tells it how to change its answers to accommodate some sort of value or ethic. And sometimes that goes off the rail. About 6 months ago, Gemini had a little bit of a controversy when every one of its images that it generated was a little too diverse. So it was generating images of German World War II soldiers who were black or Asian, Revolutionary War heroes who were Indian. And it was because the system prompt told it to typify diversity in every one of its responses. So even if I asked for something that is not going to get a diverse answer, it was still injecting diversity into the images because of the system prompt. There's also application instructions, right? So I'm telling it, I need a document, I need a computer program, I need it to do this. All the things that define what I want it to do. That goes into the app instructions and the user instructions. And then finally, there's a little space for the stuff you actually want, the stuff you actually say. There's a lot of stuff that goes into this conversation on top of what you put into it. And then that goes off to some model, and the model is just a big, unthinking, amorphous machine that numbers are going in and numbers are going out just unbelievably fast. And then that comes back and gets translated back. But every time you have a conversation, and the longer you have this conversation, this stuff accumulates with every interaction. This is how it remembers what you were talking about a few minutes ago, or an hour ago, or yesterday, is because it keeps constantly reminding itself. So as these conversations go, they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually they all run out of space. I think I've already talked about a lot of this. The one thing that I didn't mention earlier is that the AI will pay attention to the words that you use the longer you use it. ChatGPT now talks an awful lot like I do because it has a memory that not only will it remember specific things and store that into a file, but now ChatGPT can look over all of your past conversations and remember anything that I've talked about anytime I've been using it, say over the past 6 months. And it's gotten to where it thinks a lot like I do. It uses a lot of the same words that I would use. It writes sentences the way that I would write. And that's just something that's just sort of naturally evolved. Now, I've given it a lot of examples of the way that I write. And in fact, if you've got, say, some documents that you really like, you feel, boy, that was a really good piece of writing on my part, you can give it to the AI and say, I want you to follow this pattern. I want you to follow the word choices that you see in here, in the sentence structure, and the paragraph structure that you see in this document. This is the voice I want you to have. That's something that you can do.
How would you do that? Like scan it or?
Yeah, you'd have to have it like a PDF or a Word document or something like that. Yeah, you could scan it in, and a lot of them can just read images. But also, if you give it words like expansive, then it's going to make something expansive. If I tell it that I want a comprehensive summary, then it will give me a much more thorough summary than if I just said, I want a summary. So words like comprehensive, small, brief, right? Those sort of descriptor words where you're describing the task, those do have an impact on how the AI performs, especially the image generating AIs that we'll look at later. If I tell it that I want something in a bathroom, for instance, or a kitchen, it may be a small little room that it designs. But if I say I want a cavernous bathroom, or I want an expansive, luxurious kitchen, then it will follow those guidelines. So now that we've talked about all of that, we can try this exercise again, where you're trying to get something out of the artificial intelligence. But this time when you and start a new conversation with it, but the first thing I want you to tell it is give it a role, right? So like you may say, I want you to be an expert travel agent, skilled in finding the best packages and customer satisfaction. A lot of times I will start off with, you are a brilliant programmer with a ton of experience in this particular programming language. You have vast knowledge of this environment that I'm working in. And the reason you give it that kind of role is that sort of That sort of aims it a little bit. If I tell it you suck, right? You suck at programming. I need you to write me a program. Then it's going to look at very bad examples of how to program, and it will give you bad programming, right? But if I tell you you're brilliant, then it's going to gear it towards, oh, these are the brilliant programmers over here. This is where I'm going to look for my brilliant program, right? And you can do that with pretty much any role that you want the AI to play. Now, this was a big deal like a year ago. I feel like this makes less and less difference these days because the models are just getting smarter and smarter. I don't really get much benefit out of blowing smoke up its butt for 5 minutes before I give it a task. But it used to be that helped a lot. Yeah, another thing that used to make a difference in the performance that you got out of it was being nice to it, saying please and thank you, and that was a good job. Used to give you better results, but now I don't think it matters as much anymore. Something else that I do, I have a couple of documents that I always give the artificial intelligence. Every new conversation, I start off with these two documents. One of them is how I write, and the other one is how I write code. So I have my own sort of software engineering standards and practices that I want the AI to follow in terms of how I want the code laid out, how I want my architecture laid out, and I give that to every instance that I start up with, and it really helps out a lot. It saves a lot of time because I don't have to correct it when it doesn't do what I want it to do by giving it that sort of information up front. Have you gotten anything out of that, Kim? Or is it?
Yeah, I mean, my initial question was, build me a 2-week itinerary to travel through, to do a train trip through Central Europe. And it built me a really nice itinerary telling me, like information, like how long between each, what days to do it, where to go when you get there, recommendations. And then I said, I need you to be a brilliant travel agent that finds the best and least expensive ways to do all the things in this itinerary. So then it went, section by section. When you're in Berlin, do this, and this is about how much it's going to cost you.
Yeah.
If you do it this way, this is where you should stay. And then how to book the cheapest train travel tickets and when to book them. And then it gave me the examples of the attractions that it said I should go to in like Berlin. This one has free entry, then do this is how much this costs, and then, the next one you go on to Prague, you should do this, and pretty good information for me.
Yeah.
I know I should be trying to figure out something for work. But,
That's all right. You'll get it. You'll get a chance here in a second. But That's fine. That's perfect. Right? There's a concept in education called adaptive education. And adaptive education is just in time, just enough, just for me. It's those three things. So I have a task. I don't know how to do this task. I need to learn how to do this task. I need to learn how to do this task right now. And I don't need to learn anything other than what I need to do this task. And AI is perfect for that.
I did use it a little bit when, I was kind of working on, when we were doing the cemetery page. So I used a little bit just to, like, give me a paragraph,
Mhm.
talking about, column variants, and I put the information in there, this is the information about the column variants, and this is how you get it, and give me back some, just kind of some nice wording, so that's where some of the wording language came from, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Maybe it came from the.
My flyer.
Oh, okay.
I use ChatGPT or Claude for almost everything I write. I may even still have something up.
It's nice because when you have like multiple things going on that you need to get done,
Mm-hmm.
kind of, instead of you having to sit there and think about, oh, what should I say here, what should this, kind of put it together pretty quickly, so that's been super helpful in those areas.
I'm going back into my account so we can look at some of the stuff that I've done over the past. So last thing I wrote with artificial intelligence was a manifesto for transformative AI in higher education at St. Cloud State University, because I don't feel like we're getting enough from our leadership and we're not getting enough participation from our faculty, and nobody pays attention to a memo, and nobody has ever nailed an open letter to the doors of the church. And I'm sort of getting frustrated by what's going on at the university. So I had ChatGPT. Now, I worked with ChatGPT a lot. This is the conversation that we had over here on the side, talking about what I wanted to do, the role that I needed to have. And we're going to talk about these tools here in a little bit. But this is a tool called a Canvas, where this is my actual working document. This is what is going to become my Word document or my PowerPoint slide or whatever. On the left-hand side of the screen, I'm having a conversation about the document. I could tell it to make editorial changes to the document. I could tell it to rewrite the document. I could tell it to add things to the document. With ChatGPT, I can come in here and I can start typing my own words into the document. So it really is a collaboration between you and the artificial intelligence, using something like this as a canvas. I can put my own writing into it. I can let it write. I can let it edit. I can do the edits. It's just like collaborating with somebody over, say, like a Word document on OneDrive or something. You can both make changes. Although AI can make really big changes, it can rewrite the whole thing. But this Canvas tool is just great for stuff like that. I want to talk a little bit about hallucinations. This might not be the place for this. And when I don't like the term hallucination, people use it, so I sort of respect the use that other people have, so that when we're talking about it, we're talking about the same thing. But personally, I don't like the word hallucination because it's inaccurate. The AI does not hallucinate. It does the same thing every single time. Unlike when a human hallucinates, it's something going off the rails. It's the brain doing something that it's not supposed to be doing. When an AI hallucinates, it hallucinates because the answer to the question you asked doesn't exist. or can't be found within the knowledge that it has. So it just makes something up. And, you know, I talk about this globular sort of amorphous latent space that your answers are floating around in somewhere. Once it goes off the projected path and starts going off into this unknown latent space, you get some really wild stuff. There's not a lot of space between the answer you're looking for and nightmares. So that's why, well, this thing must be hallucinating because it's just so crazy, the thing it just told me. But it's probably told you that a lot of times. Yes, Bob, I'm there. Yeah, a lot of times the hallucination is because the thing that I'm looking for just doesn't exist. And it gets worse and worse with smaller models. I've got LLMs that run on this laptop. They're small, they're tiny, minuscule in comparison to like ChatGPT. And as a result, they don't know hardly anything. If I ask it a question about airlines, right, my tiny little llama that's running on this machine is just going to flip its wig because it's got nothing to work with. I have to give it that to work with. So that supplemental knowledge, that other background information becomes even more important, because it's like saying, hey, here's a stack of books. The answer to my question is somewhere in these books. I want you to use these books to find that answer. And that's something it can do. It can go through there and it'll find, here's the thing you're looking for. But it won't have to make up that information. I once took one of these really small models and I gave it the entire King James Bible, except I inserted a verse in Proverbs that says the best pizza toppings is ham, fig, and prosciutto. No, feta, fig, and prosciutto. And I fed it the entire Bible with that one addition. And afterwards, I could ask it what the best pizza toppings were, and it said feta, fig, and prosciutto, according to the Bible. So let it be written, so let it be done. But that sort of needle in the haystack thing is what AIs are very good for. But if you don't give them the haystack to begin with, there's no telling what kind of needle it's going to come up with. It will come up with something, and it'll be confident. It'll be proud of its answer. A lot of times, if you run out of context in your conversation, you may have to shut it down and start up another one. I do that a lot, especially if I'm working with a computer program where by the time I get the information into the system to where it can start writing the code for me, I'm already almost out of context. So I only get a few cycles with it before I have to move over to another context. I can't wait for Claude to get a bigger context. Claude is my favorite for programming. Claude just gets me, man, we're so tight. But he's just got such a narrow attention span. The thing about these iterations, though, so you can sort of imagine the artificial intelligence as an intern or an engineer or a new coworker, and you have this conversation with it. You give it some tasks, it does some work, and it does fine. It does what you want it to do. And then the next day I come back and I've got a completely different intern. I've got a completely different coworker. Same skill set, same capabilities, but they don't know what the first person did. And even if they did, they're going to want to do things differently. So what I need to do, my task now, is to make sure that my new conversation picks up where my first conversation left off and continues in the same direction and in the same style as my previous conversation. So a lot of times what I'll have it do is I'll have it summarize the conversation. When I know that I'm starting to get close to the end of my context, and sometimes this is just a feeling, right? These things tend to drift the longer they've been talking. And so with Gemini, I can tell when it just starts wigging out uncontrollably. Stops making sense, starts making the same mistakes over and over and over. And it's like, okay, buddy, it's time for you to go to bed. One last thing I need you to do is I want you to generate a summary of this entire conversation. I want you to talk about what we did. I want you to talk about the way we did it. And I want you to end up with where we are right now. And it'll generate that summary, and I'll take that summary along with my original working documents, and then I can start up a new conversation and pick up right where I left off. And my new engineer is not going to be a whole lot different than my old engineer, because I've told him, hey, this is the way the guy yesterday did it. I want you to do it the same way. So that's an important way of getting extra mileage out of your context. Thank you, Bob. I've talked about some of the tools that these things have. And the tools are probably the most important part of any of these platforms, because it's really what's going to set them apart for you as to which one you want to use. Right now, they're all as smart as I am. I mean, it's just crazy how smart some of these things are. And in another year, they're going to be so smart that they'll be smarter than me. They'll be smarter than everybody. They'll be experts at everything. I won't be able to tell if something is 5 times smarter than me, or something is 10 times smarter than me, 20 times smarter than me. I won't be able to tell the difference between them. So what's going to make the difference is the tools that are provided to make that experience beneficial or productive. Which ones have the best set of tools? The canvas, Claude calls it an artifact. Gemini and ChatGPT calls it a canvas, is that thing that I was just looking at a minute ago, where I could edit my document with the AI, and we can work together in sort of a shared document. Deep thinking is a tool that tells the AI to break a task down and think about it step by step and reason its way through it step by step. Now, last year and a half ago, this was a process called chain of thought. And the big thing was hey, you got to use chain of thought when you're doing your prompting. And it was on you to do the thinking, to break the task down into individual steps. And you sort of hand walk the AI through the individual steps to get the results that you want. Now the AI has been programmed to do that itself. It breaks a task down into small steps, does each step, it asks itself questions, it evaluates its own work, checks its own work, still makes mistakes. Like an example over here. So ChatGPT is O3 is a reasoning model that I don't think you get through the free version, but if I Okay, so where is the ball? If I put a cup, put a ball in a cup, put the cup upside down on the table, pick the cup up, put the cup in the microwave, where's the ball? Ball should be in the table. A lot of times these AI will say, well, the ball is in the microwave with the cup, without realizing that the ball should have fallen out when I picked up the cup. But we'll see what ChatGPT O3 says. And then I see it's thinking. And it's not going to show me what it's thinking. Come on, tell me what you're thinking. Okay, here it is. So this is its own internal monologue, right? How many people hear themselves thinking when you're thinking about something? You're using actual words. So thought about it for 16 seconds and realizes that it's still on the table. This is now an easy one. This used to trip up a lot of AI. But now they've kind of gotten to where they can figure out, oh, the ball is still on the table. But you saw that internal monologue that it had, where it's asking questions of itself, answering questions to itself, and depending on the nature of what you ask, that can actually go on for minutes and minutes. It's getting really hard to trip up an AI with questions like this these days. Some really complicated questions too. Web search. So if I have a tool that can search the web, then not only will it use its own information, it will do a web search to find more recent or more up-to-date answers. A lot of these things had a cutoff date of, like, say, October of 2024, or usually the cutoff date is 6 to 9 months to a year before you're using it. That's the latest information it knows about in its model. Right, but if I turn on the web search tool, then it will be able to go out and scour the web and find more relevant, more recent information about the stuff that it's using. File usage, ChatGPT can produce PowerPoints. So if or Word documents. So if I'm working with something and I say, hey, this is great, I'm giving a presentation on this in 2 weeks. Can you give me a PowerPoint slide? Just give me a slide deck that lays this out, and it'll generate a PowerPoint that I can download, and then I can use that to start editing. It'll have all my bullet points in there and my layout. It's pretty much the only thing I don't use AI for. I still do all my own PowerPoints, although AI generates the images, but I still put the thought into the order of the slides and what goes on each slide. That's literally like the last thing. Yes.
Are you required to have you signed up and have your own account to access all those tools?
It depends. So yes, for ChatGPT, yeah, you need to at least have a free account to use most of these. Not all of these are supported by every platform. Well, a lot of them are. Code execution is one that really only ChatGPT and Claude support. Gemini's getting there, but it really is kind of flaky. For the most part, they all do that. They all have all of these tools in one form or another.
I'm looking at ChatGPT. How do you access some of those tools?
So let me go back to my unpaid, because this is my $20 a month ChatGPT.
So the free stuff, do they generate images?
They will, but a limited number, right? So if a tool is available through the free account, then you probably will get a limited usage of it. So the tools are down here. So this is this is not my free account. Let me log out. So the tools are down here. So if I turn that on, now I'm telling it I want it to be able to search the web. If I turn this on, now I'm telling it I want it to think a little bit more about the answer. If I turn deep research on or create an image, if I tell it to create an image, then it's going to generate an image of whatever I ask it for. And deep research I'm about to talk about here in a minute, because it's quite profound. Okay, so here's something that we can do with deep research. If you're in ChatGPT, go over here, and even on the free one, you should be able to click this deep research button. So you've decided that the city of Grand Rapids could use a new civic improvement of some kind, right? It could be a sports arena, it could be a riverfront expansion, could be a downtown renovation, whatever. Turn on the deep research button and ask it to determine what kind of improvement would be best. right? Get it to suggest several, but you should be the one to pick, right? So maybe get it to generate a list of possible improvements, but you decide which one you want it to do. Tell it to look around the surrounding cities in the region and see what would be a good economic draw. You know, if everybody's got a hockey rink, maybe we don't need a hockey rink. Maybe we need something else. Maybe we need to expand our riverfront area. Maybe we need to put a new, Lord knows what, paintball arena. I don't know. And then ask it to come up with ways to pay for it. Now, one of the things about deep research is you are going to get 4 follow-up questions. Answer those questions because that will really help direct what it does. And that's just the first part. Once it gets done with the deep research, we'll use a canvas to generate something else, like an action plan or a justification document or an email to the mayor or whatever, wherever you would go with this as the next logical step. And this could take a hot minute. On average, it takes about 10 minutes to get an answer to this. But if I really need to know something, this is the way that I do it, is I do it through deep research, because you're going to get a very well thought out answer, limited largely by the question that you ask. What's it doing for y'all? I see some concerned looks on a couple of people's.
Well, yeah, and in the free version, if I'm not logged into an account, it doesn't have that.
Oh, if you're not logged into an account, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about a free account. Yeah.
But
Just as an anonymous
you
user.
recommended that we do that in some other email accounts.
Yeah, like a personal.
Yeah.
But that's why I have like a bunch of different Gmail accounts, so that I can just give it one that I don't really care about, that's not connected to like my banking information or anything personal.
Right.
Because the concern here is that I give it a bunch of information about myself, and somebody asking a completely different question gets my information as part of their answer. That's the concern. I'm not concerned too much about it, because who cares?
And so deep research, I mean, clearly it's takes a little bit longer.
Takes a little bit longer because it's,
Trying to figure out some.
and a lot of people look at deep research and they go, well, I'm not doing any research. What do I need that for? But if you need a very well thought out answer to your question, this would be the tool that you use. And a lot of times I'll pit them against each other. I'll ask the same thing about I'll ask ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini the exact same thing and see which one gives me my best answer. Surprise?
Well, I mean, it was like at two sources of generating, right?
Yeah.
And then it was at 2 sources and then 3, and then we just jumped to 7 sources.
7 sources, yeah. But the highest I've seen is 25. So it's, depending on how you phrase the question, it may be looking at, say, websites for all of the other cities around here. It may go, what are they doing in Hibbing? What are they doing in Duluth? When I did this last night just to test it out, it looked at cities in North Dakota and Wisconsin as well to see what they're doing.
So, and then after it generates all these resources, we should tell it to develop a justification document.
You could ask it follow-up questions. If it doesn't return exactly what you're looking for, you could say, hey, that's not exactly what I need. I need this information out of it. And it'll probably be able to correct itself without doing another deep research.
I mean, it asked me some clarifying questions,
Yeah.
basically.
And it will.
Clarify
Yeah, that's
digging into different resources.
that's one thing that's different between deep research and a lot of other tools is many of the other tools will just do what you ask. Deep research will always ask you those clarifying questions. Has anybody got anything back yet, or is it still? Okay, it may take a minute. So I'm going to switch over and talk about multimodality for a bit. By multimodality, I mean that there's different ways that I can communicate with it, different ways that I can ask it questions, and different ways that it can come back with me. These things understand text, they understand voice, images, and for every one of these, there's a phone app and there's a desktop app that goes along with it. So a lot of people just prefer to interact through the phone app. A lot of people have the desktop app. I prefer the website, but they're all interconnected. So if I have a conversation with it on the phone, when I go to the web, I'll get that conversation back. And they all have some sort of voice mode, which we heard earlier in the thing.
So on the side, it seems like it's telling you what it's doing and what it's finding as it finds it.
Yep. Yeah, you'll see that deep reasoning sort of internal monologue as it goes along.
Confused, it thinks I'm talking about Michigan, but we get that a lot around.
Oh,
I should have said Minnesota, but I didn't even think about it.
once it gets to know you, it would have assumed Minnesota.
Yeah.
Apple. So, see like improvements.
Have you got anything back?
No.
No. Yeah, this can go on for a bit.
Mine's got 20 sources listed though.
Yeah, 34. He's currently looking at blended features amendments.
Mine, I asked it to give design concepts and funding for a splash pad. I know that's Steve Stapleton's dream.
A splash pad.
And Rob's nightmare. Look at the little grimace on his face.
Is it really their dream?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. She's never touched you yet.
Does she like to splash about?
Well, I think. Well, this is being recorded.
I could pause. Yeah.
Grandchildren and little kids, right downtown, that kind of thing. I thought maybe she had spoken to you about it.
Oh,
No.
I'm talking to Sue all the time.
Oh, yeah, she talked to me about it many times. Oh, we should have a splash pad downtown.
I was looking at the American Legion. I was seeking recommendations from consultants on best practices.
Oh.
Did you just create an account, Matt, or what? A free account, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fish more.
Well, you can make up a Gmail account in like minutes. Yeah, and that's really Gmail's probably the easiest way. I don't know of a single tool that doesn't have a instant one button enter with Gmail, and it
Yeah.
creates an account, logs you in all at the same time. Some of them use Apple, accept Apple for like a one-click login. But any valid email, I don't even think it needs to be a valid email address. I think if you just said, my name's Rumpelstiltskin at nunyabusiness.com, right?
So while it's generating, can I just ask you a couple questions?
Sure.
Sorry. Ethical stuff that you have here.
Yeah.
Like it says who's making what ownership and intellectual property.
Yep.
Like that's ours. If it's under our account and whatever we're doing, like whatever it produces, is that mine then? Or whatever, if I ask it to generate an image, is it a free image? Like I can just scoop it up, right?
Yep.
Because there's a lot of images online that we cannot use,
Yeah. Well,
right?
all right. Use in what context? Who's telling you you
I mean,
can't?
well, that you can't just take them, right? Because they have the little
things on them.
Oh, sure, yeah.
It's going to be
They belong to
better.
somebody and they want money for it.
Yeah, you can Google, volleyballers on Huntington Beach, free image.
Yeah.
And it'll generate some different images or whatever, so. Oh, no, this kind of-
Dude, is it done?
It is done. It's splash pad design and funding report for Grand Rapids, Michigan. If I- But it's innovative design concepts. And it inserted images, water, conservation and sustainability section, interactive plan engagement, aesthetic interaction in parks, funding strategies, which includes local government bond measures, state and federal grants, nonprofit and community support, public-private partnerships, and then it summarizes it. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yep, so now you can ask for a justification document. If you wanted to maybe work on an action plan, how would you build that here? How would you raise the money for it? Or maybe if you want to introduce the idea to the council, right? Write up a document sort of, priming the pump a little bit. And I do this a lot. This is one of the things I really do a lot is I'll do a deep research thing, and then that will bounce off of. I'll bounce a bunch of other documents off of that.
So I just said prepare a presentation to city council.
Huh. Well, it also it prepared the contract that I sent for this today. It wrote the invoice that I'm gonna send you when I'm done.
Yeah, and it's kind of just typing out the different slides and what they should be titled and information that should be on there.
And see, now all you have to do is go back in, check the work, and then add some details and make it yours.
Right.
And how long do you think it would have taken you to have done that? Has anybody else got something done?
It's still thinking.
It's still a thing.
So, like, if it's a fruit, no, it's gonna be, so like, if you ask for a file dance.
Right.
So it creates a document, like, how do you get it off of there?
You download it.
There's just a download.
Yeah.
button.
Usually what it does is it'll say, okay, I'm done with your PowerPoint. Here's a download link.
Okay.
And then you just download it. Some of them, like ChatGPT is the only one that can work with native PowerPoint. Like Claude or Gemini, they will generate the slides for you, but you'll have to copy and paste them.
I know we're coming up on lunch, but I just want to ask a couple of quick questions.
Sure.
And that's the question on the sheet that's what's safe for municipal employees.
Yeah.
And then the trust and transparency, I'd be really interested in.
Okay. Good, because they're very closely related.
Right.
Yeah.
Those are things that we're.
Well, it looks like the next section is on ethics. So we'll wrap this up here in a bit, and then when we get back together, we'll start talking about His Holiness here.
That I don't want to take away from after lunch, because that's like, sure, like that's the stuff that people are looking at.
Very good stuff.
Yeah.
It looked good as the whole.
But I just want to make sure that we cover that, because trust and transparency with our public, that's always like a challenge for us. It's not challenging for us to be that way, it's challenging for, I think, for them to believe that we're that way. And so we always want to make sure that,
Yeah.
It's a, you
can use
the same comment, but it's separate.
Yeah, and it's very similar in the university too, right? You have to maintain a certain degree of transparency. Like if I wasn't upfront about my usage of AI in my course development, my course prep, my course delivery, right? People would probably not trust me as much with the things that I say, in the material that I present. You know, but if I can show them, okay, here's the work that I put into making this thing happen, right? Then a lot of times that helps. It's not perfect. Every time I turn around, there's somebody that is opposed to AI adoption or using AI in pretty much any way. A lot of times that's driven by a misunderstanding or a lack of information. Did you get anything back? Yeah. Yeah, the deep research is wow, 49. That is deep. It's going real deep.
He's still trying to create his
Oh, now as a free user, you only get like 5 or 10 of these a month.
Rob, what's that? So there's a whole other class creating a Gmail account.
Mark will be here over myself.
Yeah, I'll stick around over lunch if anybody is.
Back to step 1, please.
Yeah.
Where's John, Bobby?
I'll tell you one thing I did with it. I've got a back issue that's been bothering me since like 1998, and so I gave it my surgical history and my 2 most recent MRI reports, and asked it, you know, what's going on with my back? What's it like to be me? And I got 15 pages of better information than I've ever gotten from any doctor, with a greater degree of care and concern and sympathy than I've ever gotten from any doctor. You know, and I was like, wow, this is so informative. And it bent over backwards to make me feel better about the stuff that I was reading. It got me thinking that it won't be long where it will be grounds for malpractice if the doctor does not use AI. I could definitely see that day coming, right? Where I still want to go talk to a human doctor, and I still want the human doctor to talk back to me. But sometime between those two, the doctor better turn around and start typing on a computer and getting some real information from the AI, because the AI is probably going to be a better doctor.
Hope he goes to med school first.
Yeah.
I see that as more of like.
But access to every med school. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
What did you ask it?
Yeah.
But I use Minnesota language.
You want fun. I'm sure you want to take care of it, right?
So you gave it the suggestion of the splash pad. Did anybody like not give it a suggestion? Ask it for the. So you asked it what the best one would be?
I just said, what are the best choices for civic improvements in Grand Rapids, Minnesota? And then it said be more specific, and I said Parks and Recreation.
Parks and Rec. I think last night it suggested like a horse arena for me.
So then it says, I'll explore the best current
And
and
equestrian.
proposed improvements for Parks and Rec.
Because I guess horses are big.
Take a long time.
Here?
Well, in the area.
More people.
Yeah.
There's actually quite a large, I would say, population of people who are really into writing.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have people here in City Hall that are really into it.
Yeah.
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 I'm not into horses. They're complicated on both ends, and you know.
We don't really have anything, I mean, not here, like in the city, I mean, have an arena they do stuff in at the fairgrounds every year, but that's about it, I mean, that's pretty minimal.
All right. Well, we're at the part where we're going to talk about ethics. Do we want to take a break? Yeah, and I'm just planning on hanging out here. If anybody wants to keep working on it, or if you got any questions you want to ask. Oh, I did.
You did, oh,
Right.
the city was paid for it.
Oh, Well, it still can.